Hi everyone, welcome back to Other Realms of Reality, my new podcast. And this is part 6, where I'm going to talk about a form of spirit communication. And this can happen in many different ways, through our dreams, through thoughts, through feelings. We may hear something, see something, and just know something on a deep level. There are many different ways that spirit can communicate with us. And today I'm going to share one of my experiences of spirit communication through dreams. And this particular experience was quite prophetic because it was a communication that actually changed the trajectory of my life. It's so important to pay attention to our dreams because dreams can be a huge combination of mixed messages. Some of the information could be things that we are releasing or processing from the day, from the week, or the month before, or just past lives. And sometimes it's a form of communication with our loved ones on the other side, or even our higher self. And some actually get really good premonitions or prophecies this way. So it's really key to pay attention to your dreams where possible, certainly if you do remember them. I will probably revisit this subject a bit later on in this series because there's another really, really good example that I'd like to share, but I will keep that for a separate video, otherwise it will go on a bit too long. So the example I want to share with you today, just to show you how this can play out, is quite unique in the sense that it changed things in my life, and I'll explain now. So just to set the scene, this happened approximately 20 years ago now, so quite some time ago. I was in a relationship and I'd only been in that relationship about a year. And we were both going on a short break together in Scotland. It was only literally for a long weekend. It was during a lovely sunny season, so decided we would go camping, and we were going to camp by a lake, which was in a really beautiful part of Scotland. And whilst we were there, we were going to look at properties with the view of purchasing something together. The location where we stayed was absolutely stunning and very idyllic. And that particular day, after we arrived, we had a good look at a few properties, and there was one that stood out the most. So we decided to spend the next morning just really having a good old chat about it and weighing up the pros and cons, really. So that night I went off to sleep as normal in the tent. It was a lovely location and just nature sounds. It was very easy to get off to sleep there. It's just so beautiful. And I had this very vivid dream, one that still stands out to me to this day. I saw myself in the dream talking to what I presumed would be like a guide or a spirit guide. My perception of guides at that time was tall men in white robes, long white beard, the typical holy man look. And so that is exactly what I saw in my dream. The spirit will often show you what your perception is in dreams because it's a way of getting the message across to you that is what you're looking at. If I'd have seen someone else, I wouldn't have known who they were necessarily. So by showing me this image of this man in white robes, I knew instinctively that to me that could be a guide. And the message of the dream was the guide was actually telling me that I needed to end the relationship because my frequency and vibration was being lowered whilst I was in that relationship. And that part of me that I saw in the dream accepted this quite freely and without angst or concern, and was completely calm about the whole situation and accepting of the circumstances. Whereas myself, watching myself in the dream, was absolutely panicking and dismissing it, thinking, well, no, it can't be real. I remember waking up that morning feeling very unsettled about the whole thing, so much so that I felt that I had to share it with my partner. We chatted about it, and at that moment, I was really just thinking it was just a dream. I mean, it wasn't really resonant with me in that moment. We were what I thought. We were very much in love. We were just in a relationship, enjoying the time together, and everything was rosy. So we continued about our day. We went for a lovely walk along the lake. As I say, everything was feeling wonderful. And I suggested, let's go for a breakfast and we can have a chat about the property we saw yesterday. So we were both in agreement, and I said I would treat him. And so we went for a lovely, good old traditional cooked breakfast. The cafe we stopped at was very, very busy, and there was a table we managed to get, so we were lucky. And whilst we were waiting for the food, we discussed the property that we'd seen the day before and whether we wanted to put an offer in. Because it was a joint venture and we were both contributing money, I asked him about the financial side and what he was willing to contribute. But his reaction was quite unexpected. I knew that he had more money saved than me because he'd not long sold a property. And so he had what would have been a healthy deposit, but I just wasn't sure how much he was willing to contribute because obviously it was his money. But he immediately got on the defensive and raised his voice quite loud in the cafe, saying along the lines of that it's his money. He said it in such a way it was very cutting and very short. And back then I was quite embarrassed by the whole thing because I was just trying to get an idea between us how much we could put down as a deposit. I was quite shocked by his response because it's not like we hadn't talked about things prior to that. And although there were signs in the relationship where there were issues, like anything, you kind of get very absorbed in relationships and you don't see them at the time. I remember in that moment just feeling very embarrassed, very cold, and just not wanting to talk. And I literally just ate my food and kept quiet. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know where to look. I could sense and feel people just staring at the both of us. It was a very uncomfortable situation. But during that period of time, something changed within me. And I could feel there was this part of me that took control of the situation, because all of a sudden there was this feeling of overwhelming calm come over me. And it kind of just came out of the blue. It was a feeling of just complete inner peace and knowing that in that moment I needed to walk away. And I couldn't explain it at the time. It was very bizarre. It was like 1 minute I was feeling anxious and very isolated in the situation, and the next I was starting to feel calm, peaceful. And as I sat there eating my food, a realization came over me that the dream that I had the night before was real. But this time there was no fighting, there was no angst about it. It was almost like that part of me I saw in my dream I was becoming. I very calmly finished my food, paid for the bill, and got up and walked out. He followed me in quite an anxious state, talking at me incessantly while I was walking, but I remained calm, telling him I'm going to the car and I'm going to return home. The whole situation was very, very strange because I knew that in an ordinary situation like that, I would definitely not be calm. The journey back home was about 8 to 9 hours. For most of the time in the car, I just felt peaceful and a calmness that I can't say I've ever felt before up to that stage. There were moments where he was almost shouting next to me because he wasn't getting the response that he wanted. And yet it didn't seem to have any effect on me. I would respond in a very calm manner. And this went on for hours and hours. And when we got down to about 45 minutes to an hour away from where I was staying, where I was living at the time, I remember looking out the window. I was actually in the passenger seat because we'd been sharing the drive back home. And I remember looking up and seeing a full moon. And in that moment, I could just feel the emotions starting to come in and flood in, and the realization of what had happened. And that's when it really hit me, the reality of the situation. Looking back now over the years, I realized that that part of me that I saw in my dream was my higher self, because it was the reflection of me, but in the very calm, peaceful place, accepting what the spirit guide had to say with ease. And I also realized in that moment that my higher self had stepped inside me during that difficult phase to help me get through the bulk of that journey home, because I knew deep within my heart I would have struggled otherwise to get through a very difficult phase and probably would have gone back on what I'd said. But by the time my emotions had kicked in, it was pretty clear that we were going in one direction now only, and that was to go our separate ways. I look back now and I completely realised that that relationship was not good for me at the time. Although we experienced things to help us grow, I can see where my vibration was being lowered, and that's no disrespect to the other person, but we were not energetically compatible in the long term. And so I can see why that guidance was there. So you can see how dreams can have a big impact in our lives. And some may argue and just say that, well, you dreamt it and so you just decided to create it. It doesn't mean that it was guidance. But knowing how I felt at the time and looking back and seeing how it all transitioned, I knew that there's no way I could have made that decision without that support. So sometimes we just need a bit of guidance from our higher self or from spirit, just to help us get back on track if we are going off in a different direction. What I really, really loved about this experience was the feeling of my higher self stepping inside me. There was so much peace, calm, and tranquility in that moment. And it kind of makes me realize now, doing these meditations that I talked about in part 4 with Dr. David Clements, and how it's about reconnecting to the heart and the higher self. And I get moments now where I connect with the higher self, and there's this lovely peace and calm feeling that I had. But I feel so grateful to have been able to experience that for so many hours all at once when I really needed it. And it was also a confirmation for me with the higher self and what that feels like to embrace that and embody it. So this is just one of many, many experiences with spirit communication. And I will go more in depth into this, like I said, in another one, because there are so many different examples of this. But if you liked it, I hope it's helped on some level. And I will be back very, very soon for part 7 and share another experience with you. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.